I'm going to spend some time just talking about the features of Kaspersky. So, as far as features are concerned, we have endpoint control features and we have antivirus protection here as well. I'm just going to bring up the GUI, hopefully you can see this here, of Endpoint Security 8, just to show you really that we have kept things in a logical format there as well. So if there's anything that you need to administer and you know where it is in the GUI at the endpoint, then it will be referenced here within the policy at the same place. So, Kaspersky Endpoint Control features. We have the first three that I'd like to mention down the left hand side here are application control. We have application startup control. So this is all about restricting what applications can be run from the endpoint. Kaspersky have something called the Application Activity Monitor, which I can briefly show you in the GUI here. The Application Monitor is there to, as it says, to monitor applications and report about all the applications that are installed onto the laptop and the desktops, etc. there. We can see there's a wealth of information that's been reported back from my machine. With that information from the management side of things, we can then build up rules to, in this instance, allow or deny certain applications from running. We can do that in a variety of different methods. Probably the most friendly method is to use categories. Now, categories can be created off of your own criteria, be that the MD5 hash, low-level metadata, even the installed location, so program files / Microsoft, and create your own Microsoft category, or it can just be specific executables that you act on. The other way is to use the Kaspersky Lab categories. Now, we provide 80 predefined categories. They range from browsers, as we can see here, through to media players, gaming, inventory software, financial software, and loads of other things there. With these predefined categories, it means that Kaspersky keep them up to date. So if a new browser comes on the market, we'll push down an update into the browsers category and record that browser as such. This then gives you the ability to either specifically grant permission to run these browsers category in this scenario, or to deny them. And one thing I should mention is that within these categories, such as the browsers one, I can opt out. So imagine, if you will, that within my browsers category here, I've set an exception for Internet Explorer, meaning that when I do apply a rule, it's not going to apply for Internet Explorer. So in this case, let's say that I'm going to deny permission. And I will specify myself in here. As you can see, we integrate nicely with Active Directory. Let's check that name. Okay, so we can see that appears there. So what I'm doing in this scenario is to block Leon Turner from running any browser, bearing in mind that Internet Explorer is excluded from that. This is a very easy way of controlling what your end users can do on their machines from an application startup basis. Like I say, it could be to specifically allow. So we do application whitelisting and application blacklisting with this tool here. If you think, well, I'm not entirely sure what applications I need to be starting and stopping, obviously this can be a very intrusive and destructive thing if used incorrectly, we do have the ability to run in a test mode. Basically, a test mode is there as an interactive mode, and it may be that you want to run this on certain machines, say for a week or so, to see how your rules are running. Furthering our application startup control, we have something called privilege control. Here it's all around regulating what applications are allowed to do on the system. So for instance, Adobe Reader is a good example there. It's there to read PDFs, sure, but we can say within the Kaspersky product here to restrict what resources that Adobe can access. For instance, we may want to restrict what it can do as far as startup settings. Does Adobe Reader need to access startup settings? I'd say possibly not. Does it need to access private user data? I'd say no. And this is all about closing those potential loopholes and vulnerabilities that applications may have. Certainly I'm picking on Adobe for PDFs because they can be a delivery mechanism for malware. So can Flash, so can Java, things along those lines. So whilst you may have your operating system nicely patched and secure and Internet Explorer nicely secure, if it's leveraging these other components from third-party developers that have vulnerabilities in them, then there's potential elements of risk there. Again, you'll note that we have some categories here: trusted, low restricted, high restricted, and untrusted. And this is how we can again regulate the applications from a category standpoint. Now, these categories differ somewhat to the predefined categories that I mentioned before, and these categories really benefit from something called the KSN, the Kaspersky Security Network. Now, I'll speak about this a little bit further when we talk about System Watcher in a moment or two. But really, just to highlight the fact that the KSN is there to build up a knowledge base of applications. Now, I believe that we have over 3 million executables known to Kaspersky. That information is shared within the KSN. Now, you as a company may wish to join into the KSN. The benefits are that you can get leverage of all of this application reputation data. It's anonymous. It means that any applications that are installed, that metadata, very low level, can be passed up to the KSN, like I say, in an anonymous fashion. That can then be shared out, and that's what we use to create these application categories there. And I can show you a bit more clearly within my endpoint here. Okay, so we can see here, for instance, that certain operating system files and things have a trusted reputation. The reason it's trusted is because it's classified as the Microsoft operating system. Millions of users have got this executable in place at this location. SVC host is going to have a digital signature, etc. So it adheres to all the correct metadata that we expect it to have, hence it's trusted. I may well have some other things in here that aren't as trusted. So Apache there. It's in a low restricted, and the reason for that is it's, in my instance, is possibly vulnerable. I'll come into vulnerabilities next. So it's all about leveraging our knowledge and then using that in a very intelligent manner so you can create these rules. You don't have to go creating your own application categories and deciding what's trusted and what's not. One thing to mention, when I do talk about trusted, it doesn't mean that we're explicitly trusting the activity of that application. These categories are continually monitored there. So the next thing to speak about, and just to finalise from an application control standpoint, is the vulnerability monitor. Now, I mentioned briefly that it seems that I've got Apache running on my laptop that's got a vulnerability in it, and that's reported using the vulnerability monitor here from Endpoint Security 8. Not only can we report on vulnerabilities in a real-time format, we can also act on them. So we have the monitor here, and that can run and report on any vulnerabilities. If I just come out of the policy here for a moment, I'll just explain that a little bit further. If I expand my applications and vulnerabilities section here, I briefly mentioned the categories, and this is where we create application categories, but also we can report on those vulnerabilities using the vulnerability monitor. So we can see here that while I'm talking about it, there's Apache listed here. So we're not only reporting on these vulnerabilities and making you aware of them, but now we can give you the facility to fix them. So it's as easy as clicking on the Fix Vulnerability link here. What will happen in the background is that we will download the published patch for this vulnerability from the vendor's website and push it out using Kaspersky methodology and mechanisms there. So that means if a reboot's needed, then we can manage that from the Security Center, and obviously we can report on all of that as we saw when we were running through deployments, etc. there. So you get high visibility, high level of reporting on it all, and it's a really good, neat answer, I feel, for addressing those problems with third-party tools and software. A statistic I saw recently was stating that out of application vulnerabilities, only 10% lie with the operating system. The rest of it is with third-party development tools and third-party software there. We do have the ability, while I'm mentioning patching and things along those lines, to push out Windows updates if you so wish there as well. And again, we can choose to install updates and push out certain security patches and even service packs if you wish via the Security Center here. So back to the policy, just a couple other areas that I'd like to cover off is device control. Device control enables the end users, rather not the end users, enables you as the administrator the ability to block certain types of devices on the network. And this is done in a very easy fashion here. We can block by types of device, or we can block at the low level connection bus to specifically block USBs, for instance. And we can also trust devices. So I may wish to go into here, and if I click refresh, that will report back on every device that's been plugged into any endpoint machine that I'm controlling. So maybe that I like to trust this specific removable drive. It might be that it's an encrypted device that I want to use. Again, I can authenticate this against existing users and groups if I so wish. So back to the types of device. In this instance, I may be wanting to block USB drives. It comes under the removable drives option here. So I can choose to go in and I can specify again certain users such as myself that will have this rule applying to them. I'll just remove everyone. So I've got Leon Turner, and on default schedule I'm just going to give myself the ability to read and not write to devices. So that can be very easily achieved. Or I can just go out and out, block all removable drives. So lots of granularity there. Finally, I'll just speak about web control before I take a swig of water. So web control, this is a feature from Kaspersky that is a URL filtering component. What we have in place here is the ability to specifically allow, block or warn certain web categories and by types of data. So just to give you an example, let's say I want to block social networking. I can block, for instance, any content to all addresses or specific addresses, or in this scenario I'm going to block by content categories. Hopefully you can see here the categories that have got an option here. There's quite a few here, all business optimal categories. And I'm going to choose social networks to all addresses. Again, if I wish, I can specify certain users and groups that have this rule authenticated against them. And in my scenario it's going to be a block rule. As mentioned, it could be a warn rule. A warn rule basically allows the users to go through to the page, but not before they have to click on a link to proceed through. And that obviously gives you the ability to report on all of that. I can set up a schedule as to how frequently I want this enforcement to occur, so it might be between sort of working hours or not there. And so there you go, you've got a block social rule in place there. You can build up certain different rules, so it might be you want a default deny rule at the bottom, so every page is blocked and only specifically allows certain pages or certain categories. The other thing just to note before I move on from this is we do have the ability to block by types of data as well. I think this is quite important. It might be something you want to choose to block the downloading of executable files to reduce the risk of malware yet again, or potentially to block video if you've got a high number of users that seem to be on YouTube all day long, things along those lines. All achievable via the web control component. This web control element is within the endpoint software. There's no additional cost to any of these features that I've spoken about. It's just within the same licensing. Because we're enforcing this policy down to every endpoint machine, even if that's a laptop and it moves away from the corporate network and out of your visibility, these rules will still apply.